Roman wars to the Cold Wars, there was always a small group of people acting behind the scenes with their hidden motives masked behind false ideals. Now the next obvious question is, who is this small group of individuals who gets to control the world around us from behind the scenes? Well, they cannot be named because they act in the shadows. No one sees them, and they act exclusively through their little puppets. The politicians, the government, the woke celebrities and influencers, journalists, the media, pulling the strings from above to propagate the narratives that better fit their hidden objectives through these puppets. And that, my friends, is why I call them the puppet masters. Everything that happens around you is carefully planned by the puppet masters in control and executed by their puppets that we get to see around us. Now, most people would stop there, but I asked myself, is this really the final answer? The more I thought about this answer, the more questions I had. How do the puppet masters achieve control? And how have a few people managed to control an entire civilization through the course of history? And this is where things start to get very concerning. And this is also where I started to realize that all of this has everything to do with what we're living through right now. Look, wars have always been about control. It'll be the end of our ability to question things and do what we believe is right for us and the people around us. And if we don't step up and stop this from happening, the next God knows how many centuries are not going to look very pretty for any of us. Now, the full story short, the world is falling apart just as the puppet masters want it. Does that really not raise alarm bells for you?
I believe lockdown was about testing control of populations. And I believe Wuhan, or wherever COVID was created in a lab, Wuhan was the perfect time and place with a meeting of people from all over the world to distribute the test. And lockdown was a playbook response already disseminated to governments for how you would work with this pandemic, or whatever you wanted to call it. And I believe lockdown was the test of different levers. So if I'm in the nudge unit that exists at number 10, and I'm from intelligence in the military or wherever, I've been given the different levers that I can try with my populations, because just as if I'm in advertising, I change my advertising up for the Spanish population. When I work with Diageo, we changed up for the Germans. So the different levers are going to work differently on different cultural populations, and here they all are, and you're going to try this toolkit. So the toolkit of control was implemented, it was tweaked for different lockdowns. And what was glorious, if I'm part of the institute, the World Economic Forum, or anybody working for the new global order, whatever, is we were able to pilot different levers and see some of them work so brilliantly, we could roll them out in other countries, so we did.
And why does that benefit whoever controls the world?
Because they have ultimate access to everything. They can maintain the sustainability of the planet. They can do all the things they want to do, but I guess their ambition would be that that is the next evolution, right? The fourth industrial revolution.
And what humans, names, organisations do you think control the world?
Well, everything you see or I see, maybe not you, maybe you. Everything you see is either Google or Apple. Online, they're two organisations that control all of online, and they control everything that you see online. And so I would say those organisations control the world.
And who controls them?
I have no idea. Some sort of global forum, World Economic Forum, some small gathering of people who were offered the place at the table if they crashed their country. Because Boris Johnson, the only explanation for Boris Johnson is that because he was, no, we're not locking down, we're not doing masks, masks are useless, we're not locking down. March 2000, he was got at in some way.
2020, you mean?
2020, pardon me. People say, oh, it was because he was sick. No. He was got at with something, and it can't be bad stuff because there's so much bad stuff about Boris and it bounces. Had to be offered something. I don't know what. But you just see, because you see the world walk in lockstep. It's not possible for nations to operate so similarly without there being some kind of global coordination, in my opinion. And
talking about the industrial military complex.
Yes.
And the influence that they have on what we're doing in the world. And that this idea that, have you found it? I don't want to paraphrase it. He went on this very powerful anti-war rant. Let's play this.
We're the ones provoking this war, just like we provoked the war in Ukraine. We are now provoking a war with China. And who benefits? I'll tell you right now, your enemy is not China. Your enemy is not Russia. Your enemy is the military-industrial complex, which has been fleecing this country to the tunes of hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars. How many times are we going to have a defense secretary say, hey, we can't account for $2 trillion in the Pentagon again? Which is happened twice now in my lifetime. So again, people are being, the war machine cannot be stopped. Who's running this country? The war machine. It certainly isn't Joe Biden making these decisions. I would like to know who is making the decisions. And I just want to remind everybody, the United States is the world's terrorist. We just set the Middle East on fire in the last 20 years. And now we're doing a proxy war in Ukraine, which we provoked, NATO provoked, and it was just admitted that we provoked it by the former Prime Minister of Germany. And now we're trying to saber-rattle with China, and they're predicting a war. Again, China's not going to invade us. China's not our enemy. We might have an economic war. That's what these are. These are economic wars. These are wars in Ukraine. It's about liquefied natural gas and making sure Germany and Russia never come together because we fear Russia's natural resources and manpower, and we fear them getting together with Germany with their technology and their capital. And so that's why we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. That's why we're doing the Ukraine war. This is all about hegemony, imperialism, and economics. And if there's a Marine somewhere, it's there because they're about to steal some natural resources from another country. As everybody's screaming about what a bad guy Putin is for invading Ukraine, the United States is currently occupying a third of Syria. And which third is that? It's the third that has the oil. And how do I know we're there to steal their oil? Because the President of the United States said so.
We're not even benefiting economically. Of course, that's the rub. Jimmy Dore, appreciate it. Thank you.
Nord Stream, man. I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
You remember how immediately people were like, oh, it was Russia, all of that. And then an independent panel actually just came out, I want to say a month ago. And they're like, no, we don't think it was Russia.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, who was it?
They're like, we may never know.
Yeah.
Like, oh, really?
Well, it's really only a few people who could have done it.
We may never know.
Yeah,
Well, listen,
we'll never know.
I mean, the bottom...
Who killed Epstein? We may never know.
We may never know. May never know. I mean, the bottom line is, look, we've talked a lot about incentives. What's the incentive for the people who make bombs? Like, they're trying to make money. So, and they're very influential. They donate a lot of money in Washington. They go, revolving door, not just from like government officials, but also they go on CNN and MSNBC and whatever, and it's never disclosed. Like, oh, and by the way, this person is like on the board of Raytheon and happens to have a vested financial interest in what we ultimately do here. So, listen, it's at the core. The profit motive is at the core of a lot of what happens in this country.
Eisenhower's speech when he was leaving office.
That's
Yeah, it's interesting. You know what's something crazy is that even the Navy Secretary, we just covered this, he came out and was like, in a few months, we may have to choose between arming ourselves and arming Ukraine. And then the Biden administration made him come up and, quote, clear up that comment. He's like, oh, I didn't mean it that way. It was just, well, no, he actually did mean it that way because it turns out that we've been sending so many munitions and stuff that we have over to Ukraine. Yeah, there you go. If the defense industry can't boost production, arming both Ukraine and the U.S. will become challenging. He literally came out and said that we may have to choose if these weapons makers don't get their act together because it did just fail its fucking audit. We don't really talk about that. Like $100 billion, they have no idea what it is.
Every year.
Yeah.
They fail it every year.
Right.
It's a congressionally mandated audit. Every other government agency is able to get through their audit.
There you go.
And the Pentagon, there you go, fails its audit for the 5th time.
There's no consequences to this either. They're getting more money than ever.
And it's
what
like,
are you spending it on?
It's not even close. It's not like they're off by a few pennies.
Yeah.
It's by like a few trillions or something. It's like, yeah, and everyone's just like, yeah.
Where do you think that money's
This is
gone?
fine.
That's a great question.
There you
Where does
go.
it go?
Representing $7 trillion in assets.
That's what we spent on the war on terror, just so people know. The entire GWAT was $7 trillion, and that's what's missing.
I'm reading the sentence wrong.
Right.
The $7 trillion is the part they were able to give a clean bill of financial.
okay.
That was only 39%. It was actually much more than $7 trillion.
Oh my God.
So 40% is $7 trillion, then we'll double it.
quite
and
a system we
Okay,
have
so yeah,
here.
we're talking about like almost $9 trillion. That's more than we spent on the entire GWAT. Our entire economy is $15 trillion. I want people to let us say.
But we can't have healthcare. That'd be too much. It costs too much. Can't
no
do
universal basic income. We can't afford it.
Yeah, we can't afford that.
Where's that money going though?
Who knows? I read once that they have one of the largest HR systems in the entire world. And I was like, on what? What are they spending that on? A lot of it, look, I have no idea. That's the point. Even with terms of Ukraine, this is a great media episode. CBS News did a whole documentary about how many of the weapons that we were sending to Ukraine were not making it to the front line, which is bullshit, right? Because if we're going to take all these weapons, I would at least hope a Ukrainian soldier is using it to protect his own life. Literally, the day after that documentary went live, he had to delete it. CBS News retracted it and said, no, actually, the situation has changed. It's not true. That report was out of context. We're going to reissue it.
It was out of date. They said it was out of date.
They said it was out of date.
And then,
and they were talking about the vast majority of the arms we were sending to Ukraine weren't getting there. And also, we have no audit. We have no way to independently verify anything that we send to Ukraine is actually being used by Ukraine in the way that we want it to.
How much money have we sent over there?
In terms of how much we've actually spent?
Military aid or?
We have spent or have sent approximately between 25 and 30 billion. We have an extra 70 billion appropriated to Ukraine. Here's another crazy thing, because we actually read these laws because we talk about our show. So it doesn't just work like the President of the United States shall have X amount of money to send tanks to Ukraine. No. It's a slush fund. Biden has a $70 billion slush fund, completely to the discretion of the President of the United States. He could wake up tomorrow, if he wanted to, and ship any weapon system in possession of the United States over to Ukraine. We have no congressional authority. It has already been appropriated. We have no way as a population to push back against that. Congress abdicated its responsibility in this case.